Hey there! I just wanted to make a quick video about something that I've personally been struggling with and finally got working. In the spirit of my other videos, at least at the time of posting, there isn't much content regarding this specific subject posted anywhere. So, what are we talking about? Gitea. Gitea is a self-hosted alternative to GitHub, allowing you to have full control of your own code. Recently, I set up an install of Gitea in an enterprise environment. Like most enterprise environments, we run an Active Directory domain to manage our Windows machines and users. Gitea has support for syncing with Active Directory via a protocol called LDAP. Getting the settings right for this was the biggest pain that I've dealt with when setting up Gitea. So, I thought I'd show anyone else who was interested in setting this up the configuration settings that I used when configuring Gitea. For the purposes of this configuration, I'm going to make a hypothetical domain that we can use to serve as an example, with the name displeased.com. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're also going to assume that our domain doesn't have encrypted LDAP enabled or, at the very least, supports unencrypted LDAP communications, i.e. LDAP that isn't over SSL. With that being said, let's jump into the configuration. The first thing we need to do is create a service account for Gitea to bind to. This will allow Gitea to access our domain and authenticate users. So, I'm going to log into my domain controller with my domain credentials. Once we're in our domain controller, we're going to open up Active Directory, Users, and Computers. It should automatically connect to the domain controller that we're signed into. Now we're going to make a service user account. I'm going to place this account into the service folder under Accounts, which I've already created. If you have a different service account directory, feel free to put the service account in there. Now I'm going to right-click, select New, User. Now for our login name, we're going to put Gitea Service. We're also going to do the same thing for the first name field. Then we click Next. Now we need a password for our service account. Be sure to write this down somewhere because we need to use it later. We're also going to uncheck User must change password at next login so that when Gitea attempts to access Active Directory, it won't be asked to change the password. We're also going to check User cannot change password and password never expires. Once that's done, we're going to click Next. Then we're going to click Finish. Now that we have our service account configured, we need to add it to Gitea's settings. Make sure you have an administrator account before attempting to configure the settings. Once we're logged in, we're going to click our user profile, then click Site Administration. Now we're going to go into Authentication Sources, then click Add Authentication Source. The default authentication type, BindDN, is the correct one for the installation we're using. For authentication name, I'm going to put Active Directory, but feel free to put whatever you feel appropriate. For our host, we're going to put our domain name, which for me is displeased.com. For port, we're going to use the default unencrypted LDAP port, 389. For BindDN, we're going to use the name of the service account that we just created, Gitea Service. But unlike our other field, we can't just place the name in the field. We need to place Gitea Service in LDAP notation. LDAP notation can be easily mapped onto what we see in Active Directory. LDAP notation can be thought of as the reverse of what we see in Active Directory. For example, if we looked at my domain hierarchy, we would describe where Gitea Service is, first by saying it's a member of the displeased.com domain, then a member of the Accounts Organizational Unit, then a member of the Service Organizational Unit, then it has the name Gitea Service. LDAP takes this description and puts it in reverse. In LDAP notation, we first specify the CN of what we're looking for. This is called the common name. Then we specify the first folder that we see Gitea Service in this case the Service folder. We annotate a folder with OU, which stands for Organizational Unit. Then we specify the Accounts folder using the same notation. Next, we specify the domain elements of our location, which are annotated with DC. In my example, I use displeased.com, which is broken down into DC equals displeased and DC equals com. If you had a domain with a third element, for example, example.displeased.com, you would break it down in a similar way, putting DC = example before the other domain elements. Now that we understand the basics of LDAP notation, we can write down the BindDN of our service account. Once we're finished with that, we'll enter the password that we wrote down before in the bind password section. User search base is going to be the base organizational unit, or folder, that Gitea uses to find user accounts. We're again going to use LDAP notation to point Gitea to the accounts folder in Active Directory. User filter is an LDAP search term for finding the user record that is trying to authenticate with Active Directory. We want to match the username of the user trying to log in with the user object in Active Directory. So we're going to use the LDAP attribute SAM account name. To tell Gitea to match with what's being entered, we need to use =$s. For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to fill out admin filter, but I'll leave a link to Gitea's documentation in the description, which covers the matter. I'm also going to leave restricted filter empty, which will allow anyone to log in. For our username attribute, we're going to use the same attribute that we used to find the user object, SAM account name. For the first name attribute, we're going to use the LDAP attribute, given name. For the surname attribute, we're going to use SN for surname. For email attribute, we're going to use mail. Now we finished, and we can click Add Authentication Source. And that's about it. The authentication source should be fully added and activated. One thing to note, however, is that Gitea won't automatically add all users from Active Directory. Gitea only adds users locally as they log in, so you won't be able to manage users in Gitea until they log in.